James ran into Waite's Magazine Company, slamming the door behind him, finally escaping the cold Manchester air that had been blowing on his pale face and numbing his chubby fingers since he left that morning on the bus for work. He looked down at his watch, muttering to himself, "I'm late again. At this rate, I'll never get promoted," which was exactly what his goal was this year, being promoted from assistant editor to editor. He sat down at the meticulously organized desk in his office. More like a walk-in closet, he thought to himself. When he was promoted to editor, his office would be large enough to fit all of Kim Kardashian's clothes in it. James smiled at the thought of this as he opened his computer to check his email. "What's so funny, James?" James stood up to greet his boss and the man whose job he was after. "Morning, Sebastian. How are you? Do you need anything?" Sebastian replied, picking up a pencil from James's desk. "I'm great. My family and I are going on vacation tomorrow, and I wanted to let you know that I'm putting you in charge while I'm gone. Is that okay?" This was the opportunity James had been waiting for. He would finally get to prove that he had what it took to be editor. Excitement bubbled up inside of him, and he resisted the urge to hug Sebastian. He composed himself and replied, "Yes, the company will be in good hands until your return." Only, James didn't know that Sebastian's return would be much longer than he thought. Sebastian grinned as he loaded the last of the luggage into the back of his family's red Mini Cooper. He had been looking forward to this vacation for months now. It was the first real trip he was going to take since he had been made editor at work. He hoped James could handle everything and that when he returned, he would not have a huge mess on his hands. "All right, we're all packed up. Time to hit the road," he yelled. His two daughters came running out of the house, all bundled up in white puffy coats that made them look like living marshmallows. They hopped into the crammed back seats of the car as his wife helped them buckle up. He sat down in the driver's seat and pulled out of the driveway. They were finally leaving. James looked at his en route GPS. 178 kilometers left. They had been driving for at least 5 hours now, and the rest of his family was fast asleep. He, too, was getting tired, and decided to turn on the radio to help stay awake. Sound blasted through the speakers, and he fumbled around in the darkness of the car to reach the dial that would turn the volume down. He eased the music down to a low drumming. He turned around, hoping that he had not woken up the girls. Luckily, they were still fast asleep. They looked so peaceful, like little angels, he thought. He turned back around in just enough time to make eye contact with the drunk driver sitting in the driver's seat in the car that was about to crash into his. Ding! The sound of James' text tone ran through his bedroom, waking him from a deep sleep. James rolled over in his bed to face his nightstand. He glimpsed at the clock. 4:30 a.m. Wow, James thought. Being editor isn't easy. He reached for his phone on the table, the noise of the text still escaping from the phone. He looked at the messages he had received, trying to make sense of all of them. James began to read the first message, eyes still blurry from sleep. It said, "Sebastian and family are all dead in car accident this morning. You are now head of company. More info when you get to work." Dead? How is that even possible? James thought. I'll finally get the job I have always wanted, I guess. A pang of guilt hit him. How could he be so selfish? His good friend and whole family had just died, and he could only think of himself. James stared up at the ceiling fan in his bedroom as he tried to fall asleep. As he lay there, he thought about Sebastian, his boss, but more importantly, his friend. He drifted off into oblivion. The next morning, James was given the full story. Turns out, Sebastian and his family had been driving down the highway when a drunk driver had hit their car. The whole family had been killed on impact, and the drunk driver had been killed as well. They were now looking for someone to be in charge of the funeral preparations because all of Sebastian and his wife's relatives were too old to do any of the planning. For some reason, James volunteered. He felt that he was obligated to do this for Sebastian, a final assignment from his boss. He began to make arrangements, calling people to break the news and telling them about the funeral. He was on the phone with Sebastian's great aunt, the sound of her crying carrying over the phone, when he learned that not only did Sebastian work as an editor, he also worked every night at a soup kitchen feeding homeless people. The more people James talked to, the more things he learned about Sebastian's life. Apparently, Sebastian took yearly trips to South America to build homes for the people living there. He had survived cancer as a kid and missed much of his education because of it. He also donated much of his money to charity organizations, and on top of that, Sebastian was a great father. James vowed not to let all these good deeds go unnoticed. He decided that each time he learned something good about that Sebastian did, he would add a flower to the funeral procession. The day of the funeral had arrived, a chilly, overcast Wednesday. James sat down on the hardwood bench in the church, listening to the priest talk on the altar covered in flowers. Flowers. 12,434 in total. They were everywhere, on the altar, down the aisles, on top of the hearse. Although James knew the flowers had great and deep meaning, he told no one what they actually symbolized. Eventually, they would figure it out, he thought. James pulled on his big fluffy overcoat as the priest said the final blessing. He walked around the back of the church to the cemetery, flowers lining the path. It was time for the burial. James watched quietly as they lowered Sebastian, his wife, and two daughters into the daughters' coffins into the dark, moist ground. They were so young. No one that young deserved to die. They were about to cover the coffins with dirt when James had an idea. "Wait," he yelled, his voice breaking through the silence. He rushed forward, picking up 4 flowers off the ground. James placed one on each of the 4 coffins. He stepped back, looking at his friend one last time. Everyone finally seemed to understand what the flowers symbolized. James smiled, knowing that although Sebastian and his family were no longer physically with them, they would still be very much alive through the good things that they had done in the world.